Dear colleagues, I will speak about the question of time in narratives of spiritual experiences, but particular type of experiences of non-religious mysticism. Some critics speak about natural mysticism, atheistic mysticism. I used the expression natural mysticism. It's a phenomenon which has a clear link with modernity, with the change of religion in our modernity, with rationalization. One of the first writers to have expressed such a type of mysticism is probably Jean-Jacques Rousseau in his Rêverie. But I turn immediately to the 20th century and to the field I know best, French literature. I think it would be possible to rewrite the whole history of French literature from the point of view of natural mysticism. And we could find Proust and his epiphanic moments in Recherche, the oceanic sentiment in Jean-Christophe of Romain Rolland, Le Point Suprême of André Breton, the surroundings of surrealism with Domal, Caillois, l'expérience intérieure of Bataille, and then early existentialism. I speak about that in a few minutes. And finally post-surrealist poetry, but that's already after 1950. Of course, that's a big history, which in fact has still to be written. And I now turn to the question of time in natural mysticism and in a particular type of text. We have to remember that in natural mysticism there is a change of the parameters of usual experience, and that during an epiphanic moment the flow of time seems to stop and to make room for a moment of eternity, in a moment of ecstasy. But these privileged moments can eventually themselves be situated in the duration of a spiritual quest, which can be expressed by literature. Which type of text? A lot of genres are possible, but I will focus on one special type of text, autobiographical accounts, where an author describes and eventually reflects upon a decisive mystical experience in his life. We could compare these texts, which sometimes don't exceed some pages. We can compare them with the traditional narratives of conversion, in which a person tells about his encounter with God. Of course, here God is not in play. We can speak about transformation narratives or narratives of arrival, because the person arrives at something new in his life. And my thesis is that when we take some of these narratives of the period of the 30s and 40s of the 20th century, that the conception of time underlying these narratives about mystical experiences allows us to make crucial differences between them. You have the texts which suppose a teleological or finalist or cyclic vision on time, and those who do not. And in fact, this alternative supposes in fact another one. The former text with the teleological vision develop a mysticism which presupposes a movement of transcendence. Even it can be what Hugo Friedrich called an empty transcendence, a movement of transcendence towards something which remains unclear. And the latter text develop an immanent mysticism. But before I come to these texts of the 30s and the 40s, I want to return to a seminal text of natural mysticism situated at the beginning of our century. And that's the famous letter of Lord Chandos of Hugo von Hofmannsthal, written in 1902. Of course, this is not a real autobiographical account, it's a fictive letter. It's not French literature, it's a German text, of course. But this letter has had a great influence on French writers. And the interpretation of this letter can be very interesting for us. I can, in a few words, some of you know this letter, of course, but it's a famous text, but I can, in a few words...
Unfortunately, we can't read it. Could you please do this?
Excuse me?
We can't read the text now because...
So I can, in a few words, remember the object of the letter. Lord Chandos is a man of letters who writes to his friend Francis Bacon to explain that he has been silent for a few years and that he doesn't write any more books. He, first of all, explains his previous state. He had faith in the unity of the world, a unity where himself he had a place, and a unity which was guaranteed by language. Now now in his present state, he experiences void and numbness. He can't write anymore. But there is also a positive counterpart, because he feels also moments of delight. And these moments of great delight are in fact a kind of ecstasy, an immediate perception of participation to being. And he has the impression that there is a harmony between things, eine die ganze Welt durchwebende Harmonie. And these moments, he experiences these moments when he is looking at trivial things of everyday life, a watering can, or when he sees animals, little animals, rats dying. But we have to say that these ephemeral moments don't fit into a global project developed over time. Well, it's interesting to see how French writers interpret these letters. For some of them, Roger Caillois, for example, who himself developed a mysticism about stones, about extraordinary stones, he says that the letter of Chandos and the ecstasy of Chandos proves insight in our tragic condition, and that it's in fact a negative revelation, une révélation négative, non pas des vérités divines et cachées, mais au contraire qu'il n'est pas de Dieu ni de vérité divine et cachée. The absence of revelation. But other writers, for example, the Belgian surrealist Marcel Lecomte, sees the famous letter as a suggestion of the intervention in our inner life of secret areas or a spiritual background. Of course, Lecomte is influenced by the culture of esotericism. But another writer says, Philippe Jacotet, says, I think his interpretation goes the same way. He says that Chandos tells us that it is in the small ordinary things that the last marks of the gods have to be searched. Les dernières traces des dieux. So here we have a suggestion of a transcendence which is made by Chandos. And in fact, Chandos, when he speaks about the fluidum, the harmony between all things, he asks the question, von woher? Where does it come from? But he doesn't answer to the question. I think this divergent, this opposite interpretation, Chandos as a man who doesn't believe any revelation, or Chandos as the man who suggests some transcendence, we can find these two opposite interpretations when we turn now to the narratives of the 30s and the 40s, which evoke natural mysticism. And first of all, I would like to take the project of the souvenir déterminant. It is, I'm making allusion to a collective enterprise launched during the Second World War in the years 41-42 by the Belgian surrealist Marcel Lecomte and his friend, the French writer Jean Paulhan. They asked some of their writer friends to write in some pages their major recollection, the major recollection of their life, the souvenir déterminant of their life. These texts were finally never put together, never published together at that time. It has been made a few years ago, but it's not a complete collection. And it is certain that several of these texts, the one of Jacques Mazouy, the one of René Daumal, of Jean Grenier, and of Lecomte, Marcel Lecomte, are an expression of natural mysticism. I don't have a lot of time, so I just gave the example of Mazouy, Jacques Mazouy, which is a minor writer, not very known, but it was a friend of Henri Michaud. He was a specialist of esotericism and was also the director of a famous magazine, Hermès. He writes a text, Un souvenir déterminant, and he speaks about a kind of revelation where he evokes a mysterious correspondence, une mystérieuse correspondance, un fluide, it's the same word as in Chandos, un fluide between all things. And this moment is a moment of ecstasy. He speaks about the time which stops. It's a moment which that overcomes him. It's without his will. But it involves also his whole life. In the little text, he says that it was really la minute qui aura véritablement déterminé mon existence. Well, we see we have the moment of ecstasy is interpreted is integrated in what I would call a personal teleology. Implicit to the life of the writer, in the sense that this decisive moment becomes really the great moment of his life, the light of his life. But it's also there's also an objective teleology because objective teleology which is implicit to the reality itself, because Mazouy says that there is une unité que je pressentais derrière les apparences de l'univers. Everything happens as if the reality, the apparent reality, the world of appearances, was not the true world, but was hiding another one. And that means that Mazoui's research is not only about his own person, as would be the case with Montaigne, for example, but about his place in the universe between the absolute and the relative. In other words, what is at stake here is transcendent reality, how unclear it may be. What is what is hidden in space is also away in time, and has to be and becomes the object of spiritual research. So there is an objective teleology in the interpretation of Mazouy. I could give other examples of the souvenir déterminant from this period and from this project. With the one of Marcel Lecomte, we find the same in the presuppositions. So there is the one of Daumal. I don't have time to speak about all these texts. We can conclude that all these texts have in common the presence of an ephemeral and simultaneously timeless moment. But that moment is also integrated in an objective teleological scheme where the privileged moment is the revelation not only of an autobiographical truth, but also of a transcendent truth which has to be searched in a spiritual and eventually poetic quest. But now I want to, that's the transcendent mysticism and the place of the place of time in transcendent mysticism. But now I would like to turn to another kind of mysticism that's in the realm of existentialism. So we are in the same years. I spoke about texts from the Second World War, but now I speak about the text from the first existentialism, so the La Nausée is from 1938. We are just before the Second World War. I would like to remember to introduce this natural mysticism in existentialism. I would just like to remember an important text of Sartre about Bataille. The text is Un nouveau mystique, where he says that there is a common experience that was an experience that is common to all writers, to a lot of writers from this period, and that's the experience of the absurd. And he speaks about Marot, Camus, but also German existentialists and German writers. There are different kinds of absurd, but that is not so important for us. What's important is that this experience of absurd can also be an experience, a mystical experience. And Sartre proves it with his novel La Nausée, where Roquentin, in one of the famous scenes of the novel, is experiencing what he calls une extase horrible, and the time stops. Le temps s'était arrêté. Of course, this is a very unpleasant experience, and the title of the novel is La Nausée. And the philosopher Jean Val, or also close to existentialist, asked made a very good remark. He said, why should the encounter, the ecstatic encounter with existence, why should it be unpleasant? Pourquoi pas une extase de jouissance? Well, I would like to show that this extase de jouissance, we can find this ecstasy in the first writings of Albert Camus, in L'Enfer et l'Endroit, in Nos, but also in his notebooks. Of course, we have to deliver ourselves of the certain scholarly intellectualistic vision of Camus, where the absurd is presented as a kind of doute méthodique, a kind of methodological doubt, which has to be overcome by revolt and by solidarity with the others. Camus himself presented the things like that, but in fact there is in Camus a very original experience, as has been recognized by Blanchot in his critics on l'étranger, and also by Guettant-Picon. And this experience is a positive experience of the absurd. A positive experience of the consciousness of finitude and death. And he writes, for example, in Le Désert, it's one of the essays of Nos, une certaine continuité dans le désespoir peut engendrer la joie. What he is describing in these little texts, which are between the narrative and the essay, and which are in fact also transformation narratives, is a moment parfait, as he calls it. And this moment parfait are in fact ecstatic moments where there is a fusion with the landscape. He speaks about nature in his native Algeria, and he says, j'étais, in the second quotation, j'étais un peu de cette force sur laquelle je flottais, puis beaucoup, puis et enfin, confondant les battements de mon sang et les grands coups sonores de ce cœur partout présent de la nature. or in the third quotation, oublié de moi-même, je suis ce vent et dans le vent. But what's interesting is also that these moments are moments where he is entirely in the present moment. The future, the past do not exist anymore. Oui, je suis présent, et ce qui me frappe à ce moment-là, c'est que je ne peux aller plus loin. Comme un homme emprisonné à perpétuité, et tout lui est présent, mais aussi comme un homme qui sait que demain sera semblable à tous les autres jours, car pour un homme, prendre conscience de son présent, c'est ne plus rien attendre. This is a decisive moment of his life. He writes, ce n'est pas facile de devenir ce qu'on est. J'apprenais à respirer, je m'intégrais et je m'accomplissais. So, these moments have an autobiographical importance, but in Camus, we see that it's not like as in the case of Mazoui, where the ecstatic moment is where the reality of appearances is not the real world, and where there is a suggestion of another transcendent reality. In fact, the reality is there completely, and this reality is the present reality. And we can say that Camus gives, in fact, a materialist interpretation of these ecstatic moments. He makes the link between the present moment and the body. It's very interesting in this text. Most of the time, when with description of natural mysticism, we have very few comments about the body, about what's happening with the body of the person. Well, it's not the same in Camus. He speaks about the way his body is struck by the wind, le vent à Ginla. And the body for him, as he tells us in another essay on Florentine painting, the body does not know the past and the future. The body is completely present. Le corps ignore l'espoir, il ne connaît que les coups de son sang. L'éternité qui lui est propre est faite d'indifférence. So, we don't have here a theological structure. The moment, the whole being is present in the present moment. To conclude now, what can we say about the comparison of these two texts? Well, from Rousseau until today, natural mysticism has been an essential feature of our secularized modernity. And we find its presence in European and especially in French literature of the first half of the 20th century. In regard to time, these experiences interrupt always the flowing of time for a timeless moment, which opens the whole density of the presence. However, an examination of some transformation narratives of the 40s shows that the way these exceptional ecstatic moments is linked to duration and to the project of writing is not always the same. If the moment appears quite always as the quintessence of personal life and serves as a model for the individual's future, in some cases, in spite of the experience's harmony or unity of all things, reality is divided into two levels, suggesting a vague transcendence. This depth of reality, suggested through the ecstatic moment itself, brings about, on the level of duration, a spiritual quest and a correspondent poetical project, which imply a teleological conception of time. That what has to be reached at the end of the process is in a certain way already given at the beginning. And this intellectual scheme we found implicit in the transformation narratives of writers as Mazoui, Domal, and Leconte. Fortunately, I didn't have enough time to speak about Domal and Leconte, is typical for natural mysticism of transcendence. Even if strictly speaking, religion or faith are not in play here, Christian but